Good morning. My name is Fred Hadley, and I publish the Village Sentry in Century Village, Boca Raton. And I have the honor and privilege of doing an interview today with my good friend, Andy Thomson, who is currently on the Boca Raton City Council. Is that correct?
That is correct, Fred. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. We've known you a long time, and I always knew you were going to make it big, and apparently you're rising in your career. So why don't you start off with just a brief biography, family, background, profession, and when you got on the City Council of Boca Raton, and then we'll take it from there. Just a brief overview.
Family's roots in Boca Raton go back a while. My parents met at what was then the brand new Florida Atlantic University in 1967, just a few years after the school was built and opened. And so they met in the library, actually, fell in love, got married, and I guess I'm the result. Me and my brother are the result. So I'm a product of Boca Raton. By the time I came around, my folks moved a little bit to the west to Coral Springs and Broward. So I grew up in Coral Springs and was there for the first 18 years of my life, where I went to public school, graduated from Coral Springs High School, home of the Colts, and went on to college at Georgia Tech in Atlanta. Turns out that Atlanta weather was too cold by my standards, so I spent 4 years there, which was great. I played on the football team there. Well, I should say I was a punter on their football team. Viewers can decide for themselves whether that counts as being a football player. But I spent what I thought were 4 great but cold years in Atlanta, where I studied engineering. I was an electrical engineer, or so I thought I wanted to be. I quickly learned that engineering wasn't necessarily for me. So when I came back down to South Florida, I enrolled at the University of Miami Law School, where I actually met my wife on the first day of our classes together. This was way back in 2005. We've been together ever since. We got married in 2009, and we are blessed to be the parents to 5, yes, that's right, 5 beautiful young children, ranging in ages from almost 10. We just celebrated a birthday for the 8-year-old 2 days ago. So it goes 9, 8, 6, 3, and 1. 3 girls and 2 boys.
I'm waiting for the words blast off.
What's that?
Like a countdown.
Yeah, right, exactly. You know, then the ages always change. They change all the time, so I barely could remember them. But I got them right this time, I think. My wife and I, we were both practicing attorneys. We've never worked at the same firm, never worked together, but we both practice similar kinds of law, that being business litigation, so business disputes, the kind of disputes that go to court. I practice at the law firm of Barretts and Coleman in Boca Raton, and have now since 2016. And I was elected originally to the Boca Raton City Council in 2018 in a special election. And I've served on the City Council ever since. So that's almost 4 years now. With that, I was reelected without opposition in 2020. And now I'm going into, like I said, my 4th year on the Boca Raton City Council.
All right, tell us a little about the City Council, the makeup, how many members there are, how many years it constitutes a term, and whether your term limited. Okay, take it away.
Sure. The City Council in Boca Raton has 5 members, the mayor and 4 City Council members. We can be elected to 3-year terms, and you can get elected to 2 of them. So there's normally a maximum of 6 years that you can be elected for. But in my case, because I was elected in a special election that was filling a vacant seat, an incomplete term, that doesn't count against term limits. So I can, if I was not running for the State House of Representatives, I would be eligible to run for re-election in March of 2023, and I could be re-elected to that for 3 more years. So I could at that point be on the City Council to 2026. So I'm not term limited. I wouldn't be term limited until 2026. But my current term expires in about a year, in March of 2023. So the City Council in Boca, we are policymakers. We're not the day-to-day operators or administrators of the city. We have a manager form of government, which means that the City Council is kind of like the board of directors. We make policy that is then implemented and administered by the city manager, who's a full-time professional. Our city has been very lucky to have a terrific city manager, Lee Fonnell, who's been there for, well, I think nearly maybe more than 20 years, and he is terrific. And the staff that he's put together there at the city is likewise terrific. So a lot of the good things that happen in Boca are the product of great management that we have in the city manager and his staff. And just for the most part, he and the staff make us, the city council, look good almost all the time.
Okay, in doing a little research on the council, I found I think it was around 2016 article that talked about an increase in the salary. At that time, it was around 7,000. They were talking about quadrupling it. Did that pass? So your current salary as a councilman is around 28,000 a year?
Yes, before I was on the city council, there was put on to change the council salary required a vote of the people, of the residents, and they approved increasing the salary. I think it had been something like, like you said, like 7,000, and currently the salary, and it's a part-time job, is now 28,000 and change, something like that.
All right, so how's this for a segue? You are now looking for a job that will pay roughly $1,000 a year more. I believe by statute, the state representative position is 29,967, and I think you get, I don't know if it's changed, about a $200 per diem for your expenses while you're up in Tallahassee. So let's talk about that. Why did you decide to go from being a local yokel to now a state representative? And why is that important to you to branch out like that?
Sure. And I should say first that I have the job that I currently have, the city council member job in Boca, is fantastic, and I love it. It has been great for us. We can accomplish a lot at the local level. A lot of people's everyday lives is governed at the local level, whether it's water or streets or police, fire, development, beaches, parks. All of these things are decisions that are made at the most local level. And there's a lot that happens there that can make or break, improve or not, people's lives. And so I've been blessed to have the chance to be on the city council. But over time, I was following the process of redistricting. Redistricting is what happens every 10 years after the census is taken on, I guess it's the every 10-year mark, 2000, 2010, 2020. Using that data, legislative districts are redrawn. And that goes for the state House of Representatives, that goes for the state Senate, and goes for Congress. Every really, level of government where you have legislative districts. And so the legislature this year was undertaking the process of redistricting. And so I was following this process along, and in the past, for the last 10 years, the Florida House of Representatives, there's been 3 members of the Florida House that represents the greater Boca Raton area. There was 3 districts, essentially. One was on the east side of town.
Can I do a screen share? Hold you right there, and maybe we can put this up if I can get this going here. Let's see, Microsoft PowerPoint slideshow. Okay, share. Of course, this is from your website. You want to just, well, I see all the names are on here. Obviously, this is Henry.
Henry.
Yeah, and this would
next to him is Charlotte.
And
next to her is Maddie, who just turned 8 2 days ago. And next to Maddie is Allie, my oldest, who turns 10 in 4 days on the 20th.
All right.
So all 4 of those, Fred, by the way, all 4 of those kids are all born in February. So February is a very popular birthday month in the Thomson household. Now, Henry is.
Tell us about this card. Is this photoshopped, or did you really make a card?
Oh, no, that's the real thing. So
that's the real thing.
There was I remember it was going back years. I remember seeing my wife and I, every so often, this was going back before we had 5 kids, I was in Europe somewhere. I think it was like Scandinavia, Sweden. And I remember biking is a very big thing in Scandinavia. And I remember seeing a parent, I think it was a dad, cycling with this bike that I'd never seen before that had kind of like this cargo area in the front where his kids were sitting in. And I thought, that is magnificent. And when I got back to the States, I started thinking about it. And I was like, I don't think there really is that many of those kinds of bikes in the United States, not that I've seen. So a couple of years go by, and we have several more kids. And I remember just on a hunch, just looking for a bike manufacturer that made a bike like that. It's called a cargo tricycle. And I came across one that made these bikes that was in Oregon. And I looked at the price, and as you can imagine, a bike that big is very, very heavy, very heavy. And it's nearly impossible to bike it on your own, so it's electric. So I looked at this contraption and I was like, this is something I have to get my hands on. And I was able to find a really good deal on one that was secondhand. Oh. And the whole point of it was I wanted to be able to bicycle with my kids around town in a way that was comfortable for them. It was safe for them. And because some of them were too young to ride their own bikes, I'd be able to carry them around. So I was able to get this cargo tricycle, and we put on there, the kids came up with the idea to have handprints on the side. And so I have put on there, as you can see, the little sign on the sides and on the front saying, we're all in with Andy Thomson. And it has all 4 kids, it was only 4th time, of their handprints on there. So I should tell you, Fred, that my 1-year-old doesn't know that his handprints aren't on there. He doesn't know what handprints are. But when he does, I'm sure by that point I will have added little Joey's handprints in his name to the side of my cargo tricycle. And I use this thing pretty often because my part of town, in fact, Boca, generally speaking, is very friendly for bicycling. So we have lots of shared use paths. And I have been able to use this when I go to take my kids to soccer on Saturdays, when I go to church, when I go to the mall, when I go pick up food. I've used this bicycle to get around town a lot, actually, a lot more. I'm pleased with how often I've been able to do it. I hope when you come to Century Village, you can bring it to a rally so that we can see it firsthand. All right, let me just stop you for a moment and move on to, we were going back to the redistricting. Sure.
Let me see if I can get this slide to change. Okay, here. What we're looking at, and I got this off the internet, of course. This is the old District 91. Now, as you pointed out to me when I spoke to you a few weeks ago, this actually covered Deerfield, Boca, Delray, and Boynton. And let's call it an L shape, but it's a tall, skinny one. And right now, it's currently represented by Emily Schlossberg. Is that correct? That is correct. The southern border there is the Broward Palm Beach line. So it didn't extend all the way to Deerfield, but it extended to the Deerfield border. Oh, okay. And it went all the way up to what I think is Boynton Beach Boulevard at the north. Okay. So you can see there that there's 3 kind of columns. So there's the middle column, which is what we're highlighting now, is kind of the center column. The one to the east was represented by a different representative, and it went actually farther north even than Boynton Beach, went all the way up to Singer Island. And then to the west, the portion that includes Century Village, that was represented by the 3rd representative, Kelly Skidmore. So the 3 of these had been represented by Mike Russo in the east, the right column. The center column was represented by Emily Schlossberg, and the west, the left column, right where your cursor is now, was represented by Kelly Skidmore. So these districts went from the Broward Palm Beach border all the way north, at least through Boynton Beach, if not further north. Now, as part of why do you suppose this is? It seems to be illogical and a hodgepodge. Is there any backstory on this? Why did they do this originally? I don't know. And the shape of those districts go back to the 2010 census and the 2010 redistricting process. So I'm not sure what the rhyme or reason was, but it had the downside, and I think that's what you were getting at, of breaking Boca Raton into 3 separate areas, which didn't, at least in my mind, make a lot of sense. So the good news there is that as part of this redistricting process, this year's redistricting, they are now combining most, if not all, of the greater Boca Raton area into one district. And you have it now on the map. The new that would be the green area, of course. The green area, the new District 91, which extends, as you can see, from the Broward Palm Beach line to the south, but it extends only as far north as the Boca Delray line. So it includes a couple of areas there that are in unincorporated Palm Beach County, and it extends to the west such that most of, though not all, of the greater Boca Raton area is included in this district. You'll also see to the west of that area, west of the green, there are some areas west of 441 and in some places west of Lyons and in some places west of the Turnpike that are part of a separate district. That is one who I believe Kelly Skidmore, who is your current representative in the Florida House, she'll be running in District 92. That's right. I'm
So
highlighting that on the map, the 92.
yeah, exactly. So the west-west part of Greater Boca will be represented by a separate member of the Florida House. But what this did was it created a very cohesive, compact, and similar district in 91, wherein all of the city of Boca Raton and many communities to the west, a lot of Greater Boca, will be included in one district, the redrawn District 91. So as I was following the redistricting process, I saw some of the various maps that included options like this, and it really got me thinking that this is an area, this is a district, and this, assuming this is the map that gets used, and it will be, that calls for somebody who has had experience representing the city of Boca Raton, understands the issues impacting Boca Raton, understands its residents, understands our way of life, understands the issues facing people on the coast, understands the people living in the Western communities. And that seemed to me to be a very, very attractive option for somebody like me. So when this set of maps got finalized, and after I had some discussions with some members of the Florida House of Representatives, including two of the members that I mentioned earlier, Emily Schlossberg and Kelly Skidmore, I decided to run for this newly redrawn District 91 to represent Greater Boca Raton.
Now, I understand you've received endorsements from those two women. Well, give us a little insight on that. Emily is now completing her second full term in the old District 91, the tall vertical one, and she has had a little change in lifestyle that is causing her to quit politics. Can you tell us briefly what's going on in her life right now?
Sure. And maybe because it's personal to her, you may want to ask her part of that, but my understanding is she recently got married. So she's completing her third term.
Oh, third term.
This will be the end of her third term. She could get reelected if she had chosen to, but she elected instead not to run for reelection because she recently got married. Mm-hmm. And she wants to spend time with her new family. So she is not running for reelection in the 2022 election coming up. And she has instead endorsed me for this new seat. Kelly Skidmore to the west similarly has indicated that she supports me in running for this seat. And she's been very helpful in helping me get up to speed on this new venture that I'm doing. So yes, I do. I'm blessed to have the support of these fantastic legislators here in Palm Beach County who represented parts of this district for many years. Kelly Skidmore represented this, not even just currently, but going back. She was previously a member of the Florida House going back 10 or 15 years and represented parts of Boca Raton. And Emily has represented our area, including my district. I'm in 91 now with distinction for now 6 years. So I'm blessed to have their support.
So that means, of course, that the field is totally yours. Has anybody expressed, any Democrat? Let's talk about, there's an August primary coming up. So with Emily Schlossberg, I understand she's expecting a baby in a couple of months. With her out of the picture, and Kelly, of course, will she? I guess she'll have to move over to 92 physically. Change her residence in order to qualify. With them out of the way, it looks like you own the Democratic nomination. Is that your thinking, or do you think there's somebody out there that might challenge you in August for the Democratic nomination?
It's still a long ways away, and it's too early to tell. Right now, no one else has indicated that they're going to run for that seat as a Democrat. So I am the only one for now. Of course, that could change. That would be ideal if it didn't change, and I hope it stays that way. But that's politics. Those kinds of things happen. But it's my hope that the Democratic Party can coalesce around me and support me. And I have, I can't get too far into the names yet, but I have gotten very, very strong indications of support from many of the local elected officials, not just the members of the House, but others, so that I have a very strong coalition of people who are supporting me for this seat. So I hope to have it to myself in the primary. So
two of the key players in Palm Beach County politics would be the so-called Prince of Palm Beach County, Dr. Andre Fladell, another good friend of mine, and the lawyer, Howard Weiss. Howard Weiss is sometimes called the consigliere of Palm Beach County, and of course, Andre is the Prince. So generally, people seeking office, such as yourself, have a sit down with either or both of these two and get their blessing. Have you met with either of them or had any discussions with them? Are they in favor of your candidacy?
Yes, I've known Andre and Howard both for many years, and both are supportive of me running for this seat. They
Oh, well,
very, very good idea.
Perfect. Then I would say, it's almost a done deal, but.
Thanks, me, Fred.
Yeah. All right, now, let's talk about for a moment, let's see, we covered that. Oh, yeah. Now, in your, on your webpage, you said that you have ran or intend to run every street, physically run as a runner in Boca Raton. Have you completed that?
I did. So I'll tell you the whole story. So it was
your pedometer.
Right. It took me a long time, Fred. So, but yeah, here's how it came to pass. So it was January 1st of 2021. So about a year and 2 months ago, I was struggling with trying to figure out a way to run more often, as a form of exercise, jogging. Because the truth is, I really don't like it. I never did. I still kind of don't. I couldn't get up the kind of the discipline to do it in a consistent way. And around that same time, I was going through this training for local elected officials as it relates to transportation safety. And I remember seeing on this Zoom training a picture that they showed on a shared screen like you did a moment ago. And it showed a woman in a wheelchair on a sidewalk where she was riding on, and the sidewalk just comes to an end in the middle of a street. And then in front of it was grass or dirt or something. And the question that these trainers were posing was, what parts of your city have similar problems? Like where in your city do you find something like this? And I thought to myself, I've represented it for years at this point. I've driven probably every street. I know all the neighborhoods. I have friends in every neighborhood, but I'm not sure I knew to quite that degree of specificity each street, each sidewalk. So it was right at that time that I came up with the idea, that's it. I'm going to figure out my solution to wanting to run more with getting to know my city a little bit better and improving it along the way. So I came up with the idea to run every mile of every street in my city over the course of a year. Now, I'm not Forrest Gump. I couldn't do it all in one sitting. So I broke it up and I did 3 miles here, 4 miles there, 5 miles here. And over the course of the year, I was able to run the entirety of our city, which is 475 miles of streets, wow, which is about 475 more miles than I otherwise would have run. So I created this initiative called Run the City, where I was going to run it and observe these kinds of issues that I see, but not just that. So beyond just getting the exercise, which was good, and seeing the streets and getting to learn them a little bit better, which was also good, I also said I need to make it a little bit better along the way. So what I did was I picked up all the litter, all the trash, all the refuse that I saw going from street to street, neighborhood to neighborhood. And we picked up over the course of the year, 1,300 pounds of trash.
Wow.
In a city as clean and as beautiful as Boca, which goes to show you the stuff is just still out there.
Right.
So, and that was really, it coincided with one of my passions in public service, which is environmental and protecting our environment. So we picked up 1,300 pounds of trash, and that's good. But we also identified 327, I think, safety improvements, things like broken sidewalks, potholes, missing crosswalks, areas where the terrain was not safe for somebody on a bicycle or a pedestrian or somebody in a wheelchair. And because I'm in the city government and I know friends at the county and state levels, because some of these roads are owned and operated by the county or state, I would pass on these issues as I observe them to the relevant government body, and they have gone through the process now of fixing, or are in the process of fixing now, these issues. So we have, I think, as a result of this initiative, not only made it a cleaner city, but also made it safer city. Now I get it, broken sidewalks, not exactly the biggest deal in the world, but I'll tell you, Fred, if you're a young parent with young kids learning to ride their bike for the first time, or if you're in a wheelchair, these issues are a very big deal. It can be. So I wanted to make sure that these issues got addressed, and they are being addressed, thankfully, now. But let me just share one last thing, the best part. So we got great exercise, that's fine. Got to know the city better, also good. Cleaned up some trash, great. Improved some issues that I observed. The best part was it became kind of, as people heard about this, saw what I was doing, they wanted to help join and do it themselves. So they would come alongside me as I was in their neighborhood or around their business or near their community and help. And so we had almost 500 volunteers come and join and help pick up the trash and identify these improvements along with me. So that by far was the best kind of impact that I think this had, because there would be all kinds of groups, Fred. There would be homeowners associations, community associations. We had nonprofit groups, the Junior League, volunteers from the hospital. We had a Boy and Girl Scout troop. We had the cross-country teams at Spanish River High School. We had the PTA at a local elementary school brought 150 parents and kids in one day and one morning to help clean up all the neighborhoods around Addison Meisner Elementary and Middle School. So that's really powerful, I think. And it created a kind of awareness, especially with young people, with kids, that this is something that anybody can do at any point in time to help make their community, their neighborhood a little bit better.
All right, I have a question.
Again this year, in case people were wondering.
You racked up 475 miles cumulatively. Obviously, you didn't do it all in one shot. But by a bizarre coincidence, that's almost the exact distance that you are from Tallahassee. Are you planning to commute by sneaker?
That's a really interesting idea, and one that I had not thought of. You are right that that's roughly the distance. I would have to leave for session like 2 months in advance to be able to do that. 3 months and then run every day. But there was a famous Floridian who did something similar many years ago. And people have asked, is your Run the City initiative, did you get inspired by the great Walk-in Lawton Childs? And I said, I knew about Walk-in Lawton. I've read about that when I think it was when he ran for governor the first time. That was part of his campaign, was walking the length of the state of Florida. Not in one day, of course, but like over time. And in fact, somebody had suggested that I take a picture of my shoes when I began my journey, and then a picture at the end to show the kind of miles that got put on the shoes, just like Lawton Childs did. And I did that very same thing. So in a way, yes, I think that was a form of the inspiration for us doing what we did.
So you did that all on one pair of shoes, is that correct?
Yes, and I had to very quickly after that, when I restarted the process, buy another pair, because running shoes are good for a little while, but they're not typically good for more than 500 miles. So I was due for another pair.
Now, this is an important question, and I'm sure you've thought about this. The legislative session goes from what, roughly November to March? Correct me if I'm wrong. Right. So
it rotates. It's the legislative session itself is about 2 months long, and it normally is in March and April, although in election years it is in January and February. But they have committee weeks in advance of that last between 5 or 6 or 7 weeks over time.
So do you plan on being absent during the entire session? Because you've got a big family, you got kids and everything. What impact do you think this will have on your family life? And I'm sure you've discussed it with your wife and everything. It's going to be a big change. Daddy won't be around a good time of the year. Tell us about that.
I spent a lot of time talking about it with my wife and with my kids, and they recognize, especially my wife, that it does involve a sacrifice. There is a sacrifice associated with it, because it's not just, not only will I be missing them, I take my kids to the bus stop in the morning every morning. I pick them up from their activities typically at night. So there will be a sacrifice associated with that. There's no doubt about it. There's no getting away from that. But my wife and I agreed, and like I said, we talked about it at length, that these kinds of sacrifices sometimes are necessary when we see things happening in Tallahassee that need change, or when we see issues that are being discussed and legislated on in a way that we just don't agree with, because that's what's happening in Tallahassee right now. I have a hard time understanding some of the proposals that get not only brought up and passed up there. So it is going to be a sacrifice for us. Now, the good news is that the legislative business typically happens Monday through Thursday during the session. So legislators come home for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And so a lot of our, as you can imagine, a lot of the quality time that I get with my kids occurs on the weekend. I coach them in their sports, baseball, basketball, soccer, still be able to do all of that. Now, that's really important to us, by the way, because some of the best times that we have with our children naturally are on
obviously you would have to fly down and up. Otherwise, if you drove, you'd burn up 2 days just on the drive. So who pays for that commute by jet? You do?
The travel expenses are paid by the state. The state statute says that the travel to and from Tallahassee is a reimbursable expense by the state to the legislator.
Okay.
Now, the flight options are not that great, though, Fred.
That's what I was going to say. I was once asking Senator Raton, retired Senator Raton, about that, and he said that he drives because not only does he want to have his car up there, but you have to kind of go south to go north. There's no real easy. Is there any nonstop from this area to Tallahassee, or how do you do that?
But they're spotty, put it that way. So recently the last time I was in Tallahassee, I was scheduled to fly out of Fort Lauderdale to Tallahassee direct, which was, rare enough as it was. But it turns out that it was like maybe 3 or 4 days before my flight, which was scheduled to be on a Monday night. They said, yeah, we're going to change your Monday night flight to Tuesday night, which, didn't work. Nice. So I ended up having to drive. And I don't believe that that's an uncommon situation. For years, legislators and anybody trying to get to Tallahassee from South Florida has said the flight options are poor. Now, I think the most reliable one may be from Miami, and that's probably what Senator Rader referred to having to go south to go north. Yeah, driving an hour plus to get on a flight that'll be about an hour plus.
How long would the drive be? Have you ever made the drive?
I have. It's about 7 hours, which is no small task.
Is that with a meal break or nonstop?
Well, I guess it's probably with at least one stop for gas. So maybe it's in the range of 7 hours.
Sure. Okay. All right. Let's move on to a couple of issues. I want to talk about the Bright Line. Now, I'm a railroad buff, and let's see. As you can see, I've done lectures on Henry Flagler, and he, of course, is the reason why we're in these towns: Boca, Delray, Deerfield, Miami, West Palm. They're all railroad towns that were on the FEC, the Florida East Coast rail line. That Flagler initially had reasons of his wife wasn't, very healthy. She had a lot of breathing problems in the winters up north. So a lot of this was driven by wanting to take care of his wife's health, and he was very upset that you had to change all these trains. There were different size rail gauges and so on. So he built the Flagler line, and ultimately he extended it to what they call the Overseas Railroad, which was to Key West, which unfortunately did get destroyed by the hurricane. But there are still remnants of the trestle that are still there. But now what's happened is in 1968, that was the last time that line served passengers in Boca Raton. And since then, up until I think 2018, it's been a very profitable freight line. They haul a lot of sand up, I think, from the south, and that's used, of course, for concrete and construction. So anyway, so what happened in 2028 is a private enterprise came along, and they determined that they wanted to make passenger service, restore it to that line. So now we have the Bright Line. I'm proud to say that on the first day of service, I drove up to Palm Beach, which was my only option, parked there, and then took the train down to Lauderdale. That was the only 2 stops when it initiated service. And then a few months later, they extended it to the Miami station. And proud to say that I was on the first Bright Line train between West Palm and Miami. And now, of course, they're extending it up to Cocoa, and then it's going to go inland and serve the international airport at Orlando. And of course, there'll be bus service to the theme parks, Disney and Epcot and Universal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the good news. And of course, in these times with the traffic the way it is on I-95 and the Turnpike, we certainly are glad that they're going back to an older but more, let's just say, ecologically friendly way of moving people around. But now we have had a number of incidents, accidents, some of them, none of which, by the way, have been attributed to either the railroad's operation, mechanical equipment, or anything on the railroad's fault. They all involve what they call illegal trespasses. Now, what's an illegal trespass? It's either crossing where you're not supposed to cross in between designated areas, or skirting around the arms and trying to beat the train. Now, these trains now go 79 miles an hour on this stretch, and they're going to go 125 miles an hour when they make that left turn at Cocoa to get to Orlando. And of course, they're building now a station in Boca Raton so that you won't have to go either to West Palm or to Lauderdale if you want to go to Disney World. And I think that's fantastic. Can you talk a little about that? What role the city council played in making this happen? What the time frame is? I think there was a groundbreaking ceremony recently. Were you at that?
It was, yes.
Yeah, I think I have a photo of it somewhere. I'll see if I can pull it up while you're talking. But all right, let's hear a little bit about first about the railroad station coming to Boca, and then let's talk about the safety issue. This has now been called the most dangerous rail line in terms of passenger fatalities per mile in the nation. And we've had, since its inception, I think 54 fatalities, and there's been like 4 incidents in just the last 7 days alone. So take it away. The floor is yours. Brightline.
Sure. Great. When Brightline first came into existence and they first built like you mentioned, the stations in West Palm Beach and Fort Lauderdale and Miami, it was clear that, well, it was unfortunate that Boca kind of is in no man's land for that service. Not many people like you, Fred, would drive north to Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, to take the train south, although I've done that myself. Or for that matter, if I was going to go to Miami, it didn't make a lot of sense to drive the 40 minutes or whatever it is to Fort Lauderdale just to take the train for another 40 minutes south to Miami. So there were really minimal opportunities for people in Boca Raton to take advantage of rail service like this. But there was a big demand for it because Brightline, because it goes to the cities that are the county seats, West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, there'd be a lot of people who not only would use it for recreation, but also for business, whether it's, lawyers or folks in government. They would use it in a big way if there was a station that was efficient for people who lived in Boca. So many years ago, as soon as the new operation of Brightline got set up, representatives of the city reached out to Brightline and said, what can we do to help bring a Brightline station to Boca? And it took us a little while, but we finally were able to get them to bring a station, commit to build a station here in Boca. And we passed that. So what we did was we entered into a long-term lease with the Brightline entity to use what is now government land right next to the city's downtown library. We have a library, big, beautiful library there with a large parking lot, and next to it was, historically had been slated for a rail station, though it hadn't been used because there was nothing on the horizon, at least back then. So it was used then as a community garden. But there was always an understanding that that space, which was right next to the library and library parking lot, would be used at some point, once it got built, for a rail station. So what we did was we entered into a long-term lease with Brightline to lease them the land underneath what was then the community garden, but also to have them build the rail station, but also a parking garage that can house all of the passengers that get on, or I suppose, yeah, get on the station, get on the railway, the Brightline rail at the Boca station. And so we passed that, I think that was in 2019, is before the pandemic. And Brightline, unfortunately, had to shut down its operation because nobody was riding it to work or really anywhere during the pandemic. And they were able to reopen their operations, I believe it was November of last year, 2021. And so as a result, we had a groundbreaking, they had to put off construction on that for at least a little while. But a few weeks ago, we had, there it is, the groundbreaking.
Where are you? Over here?
Yep, that's me.
I think you're one of
So we had the groundbreaking for the new station and parking garage just a couple weeks ago to commemorate the fact that this station is now being built. and will be up and running, God willing, by the end of this year, so that people who live in Boca, like you and me, Fred, will not have to drive to West Palm anymore, will not have to drive to Fort Lauderdale anymore to take advantage of this fantastic opportunity on the rails, but instead be able to cut over right next to Boca Raton City Hall in our downtown library and be able to catch it there. I anticipate using it a lot, not just for government business, but for my legal work. Remember, the courthouses are in West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami, very often, very close to the Right Line station. So it will offer a really good opportunity for a lot of professionals, people in business, to be able to get to these places and do it, like you said, in an economical and ecologically friendly way, which is one of the best upsides of this. Now, like you mentioned, no system is perfect. And we have seen, unfortunately, over the last couple of weeks and before that, several instances of sad instances of of accidents happening on the rail line. But like you mentioned, these instances tend to fall into one of two categories. One is people trying to get past or under the arms, the barriers, once they come down because the train is coming. And the second one is probably sadder still, is people who are on the tracks intentionally because they are facing a mental health crisis or situation. And let's take those one at a time. The first, on folks trying to skirt around or beat the train, there is really no explanation as to why they think that's a good idea, because these trains, like you mentioned, go nearly 80 miles an hour. They come a lot quicker than you think. And there's no way that I would trade the 1 or 2 minutes, not even, of waiting time. Because remember, these trains are 4 or 5 cars long and they go fast. They pass in about 10 seconds. There's no way that you could trade a minute or a half a minute or 10 seconds of time for the kind of risk that you run in trying to beat the train. And most often, as we've seen, there is no beating the train. And that is a terrible, terrible decision to try and beat these kinds of things just to save a few seconds. Now, there are probably ways that Brightline or the county or cities that are on the line can enhance some of the security measures, but we've pretty much put them in for the most part now. So this is really an education thing. I think people need to realize that these are not freight trains that last 5 minutes. Even if they were, it's still not worth trading 5 minutes for the risk you take here. It's simply a matter of wait for the train. It's only a few seconds. It's not worth the risk.
Right. But of course, the problem is that Brightline track is still shared by the FEC freight trains, which could be 100 cars in length. In this morning's, either the Post or the Sun Sentinel, I forgot where I read it, they say sometimes the freight trains, which are a lot slower, of course, there can be 20 or even up to 1 hour delays. Of course, this could be a serious problem if you're waiting for an ambulance or if there's some kind of fire or anything. So one of the things, of course, coming from the New York area, we learned about this, 100 years ago with the Long Island Railroad and the subways, is to eliminate what they call grade crossings. And according to this map, can you see this, Andy? Yeah, there are 188 grade crossings. Grade crossings mean that the tracks are at the same level as the road, which is a potential for an accident. Now, eliminating those, you either go above the road or below the road, and of course, it would probably be billions of dollars to eliminate 188. So the other thing that they're talking about in today's paper are artificial intelligence, either some kind of app that would, much like we have these Amber Alerts that would blast everybody's cell phone near the railroad crossing that there's a train coming. And another thing would be using some kind of video or infrared detection that would then send a signal to the train operator to let them know that there's something on the track. But of course, at 79 miles an hour, they would have to react mighty quickly in order to do that. All right, but the other.
And I just add that I have an appointment that I am 10 minutes late for. So Maybe we have just one more
Okay,
thing.
all
if
right,
you don't mind.
we'll wrap this up. We'll cut to the chase. Now, you mentioned environment and ecology and so on and so forth. One of my other pet projects or interests besides trains is the air that we breathe. There's no fundamental right that a human has than to breathe fresh, clean air. And having moved from New York City, which I like to call the pollution capital of America, or one of them anyway, down in Florida, I was very disappointed on my bicycle. Like you, I try to stay active, that certain days in the fall, winter, and early spring, there's this horrible smell in the air, which I thought was something like a house burning. But I then found out that what we do in Florida is our largest crop, which is sugarcane. They allow the farmers to burn the outer leaves away, which is of no use in the production of sugar, in order to harvest now the stripped canes, and then they go to the mill and they convert that into sugar. So this pre-harvest burn of the outer leaves is causing great difficulty for people that are in the area where the cane is grown, which is mostly the south shores of Lake Okeechobee. But it impacts as far as 40, 50 miles away, depending on wind direction. Now, I remember about 4 or 5 years ago, I went up before the Palm Beach County Commission and asked them to take some kind of action. At the time, I think I was viewed as somewhat of a kook, that everybody just assumed that this is the way life has to be. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. When you go to Thailand or Brazil or Australia, they've outlawed the practice of controlled burns, and they have required what they call green harvest, where you cut the leaf off with a machete and there's no burning. So interwoven with that is the whole issue of political donations. When I started complaining about this, I went onto the website and found out that practically every elected official is taking money from either Big Sugar, which would be U.S. Sugar, or the local what they call crystals, the local growers. So my question to you is, and by the way, I went to Tina Polsky, and when she first was going to run for your position, which was state rep, she's now senator, of course, and I said, what is your position on that? And she, of course, felt that she didn't want to eliminate jobs in the Glades, which is, of course, nobody wants to see jobs eliminated. So I couldn't really convince her. So where do you stand on the pre-harvest burns of sugar? Do you think it's a necessary evil, or do you think, like other countries, Palm Beach County, the largest sugar producing county in America, I believe, can transition to what they call green harvest?
Be honest with you, Fred, that I don't have a position on that. Here's why. On one hand, I absolutely feel it's critical that we maintain our environment. We are stewards on this earth, meaning we are required, I view, our job is leaving the earth in just as good of a position as it was when we were here, when we got here. So that's, I think, educated, and you can see that in my record as the city councilman that I am, that's one of the driving forces. So protecting the environment, including protecting our air, is a critical job of ours. Now, on the flip side is the idea of agriculture, and like Senator Polsky said, that there are jobs that are at issue here. I haven't developed a position on the burning that you just mentioned, and in part because that hasn't been an issue at the city level yet. The city of Boca, and for what it's worth, on the contributions front, that's never come up before for me. That hasn't come up in this election, certainly. So that's something I need to kind of dig a little deeper on, to be candid with you.
Well, now, in the last gubernatorial election, all of the candidates, including the current governor, DeSantis, they said that they will not take any contributions from Big Sugar because of the pervasive hold that Big Sugar has over the environment in Florida. And not just, of course, the air we breathe, but then there's the waterway pollution and the red-green algae and so on, which can affect the beaches and the coasts and everything. Will you agree, will you at this point make a public declaration that you will not accept, I mean, it's only a couple of $1,000s, accept any money from sugar, so that you can make policy unfettered by financial considerations. Would you make that pledge?
Fred, it really hasn't come up in my past yet, and it hasn't come up at this point in this campaign. I only
Well, it will come up once you're in Tallahassee, I can assure you.
No, I hear you, but you should know, though, that even in a world where that support came, I make policy decisions that are unfettered from them all the time. I've had to, when it comes to developing on the beach, so one of the big issues, maybe let me just answer it this way. One of the big issues that came up in Boca in the last few years was developing buildings on the beach. Most of Boca's beaches are owned by the city, and they're protected, and there are parks there, which are beautiful and perfect. That's what makes Boca very unique. But there is a couple of slivers of land that there were apparently property rights that could have been used and stuff could have been built there. And applications were made to build on those beaches there. And I voted against that and said that this is for what it's worth, the evidence that I saw didn't show me that any kind of variance was warranted that would have allowed for that kind of development. And that was something that people, I guess, thought would have been gone the other way in my case, because lots of people who do land use and development donate to local campaigns. So I don't have a problem voting against people who make contributions if that's the concern. But on this issue, like I said, on the merits of the burning, I have to look a little deeper into that. And on the merits of the accepting contributions, it's just too early for me to know that.
All right. Well, just to give you a little food for thought, there is currently a lawsuit against Big Sugar by Berman Law is the law firm, and they have a couple of residents of the Glades area, which the aspect of institutionalized racism is all part of that lawsuit. And what that means is when the wind is blowing towards the well-off communities like Wellington or Delray, where the people have a lot of money, they don't allow the burning of the sugar. When the wind is blowing towards the disadvantaged socioeconomic areas around the Glades, well, then it's okay to burn the sugar. So this is impacted on the health of the children growing up there. I remember former Senator Abruzzo told me an anecdote when he visited a constituent. He saw in the driveway was the owner's car with the motor running and the owner's 4-year-old boy in there. He says, Senator Abruzzo, whenever they burn the sugar, I have to put the kid in the car with the windows rolled up and turn on the air conditioning. Otherwise, he'll be in the emergency room. So there is a tremendous impact on the health, and it's disproportionately on people of color, the people that live in the sugar growing areas. Now, as far as jobs go, I want to point out that green harvesting is labor intensive. So you'd probably need to hire more people than the current thing. Yes, there'll be less profit for sugar, but that's the big issue. Are profits more important than people's lives? All right, I don't want to dwell on this anymore. Just a couple other things. Now, you mentioned construction in Boca Raton. Can you just talk briefly about the Surfside situation and what needs to be done to make sure that we don't have a repeat? And most important to me in Century Village, which is now some 44 years old, deteriorating infrastructure, although we're in pretty good shape, but you never know, about the issue of reserves. And many times when a community is asked to vote on reserves, the people living there, they're all in their 70s, 80s, and 90s and say, well, I don't want to pay an assessment. That's just going to help the guy that buys my apartment after I die. So can you talk a little about that? What needs to be done here to prevent another disaster, and what you would recommend in the legislature as far as compelling reserves? And let's hear your take on that, sir.
Sure, that's a really important question, Fred, because after the Surfside tragedy happened, I think local governments, particularly ones down here, took a very hard look in the mirror and thought to themselves, what do we have in place that could prevent something like this? Miami County had a recertification process for older buildings. Unfortunately, it was a 40-year timeline, and that, of course, didn't help in the situation at Surfside. Broward County had a recertification process also for older buildings, but strangely, curiously, Palm Beach County, which has lots of buildings that are older than 40 years, and also lots of buildings that are susceptible to salt and the damage and erosion that comes from that, from salt water, we didn't have in Palm Beach County a recertification program. And so the city of Boca took it up because we do have many buildings that are near the water and older than 40 years. We took it upon ourselves immediately to correct that. And we put in place the strongest and did so very quickly, a recertification process that would protect the residents in the city of Boca Raton. Our recertification process requires buildings that are older than 25 years to start the process of doing the inspections, both structurally, which is what the issue was in Surfside, but also electrically, because a fire caused by an electrical problem is probably just as bad as something that happened in Surfside. So we put in place very quickly after the Surfside tragedy, our own recertification process that sent out to buildings notices that they needed to be inspected, that they had to submit their inspection reports to the city so that the city is aware of what issues are there. And then they have to commit to doing the repairs in a timely way, in a way that the city staff, our engineers, determined was prudent. Say quickly enough, I guess was kind of the way we did it. And originally the county was telling us, no, you don't need to do that, Boca. There's no need for it. You guys can just hold off and wait until we do it. And then the county ended up not doing it at all. So the county, Palm Beach County, unfortunately, still does not have a recertification program that would require buildings as old as Sentry Village or others to undergo those necessary kinds of inspections and those repairs, if any are found. The city of Boca, though, has that. As it relates to reserves, so that's a product of state law and really a function of homeowners associations and condo associations. That's a tricky thing because you get into these situations, and I think that may have been true at Surfside, where you had an obligation by the board, by the residents, by the building, to undertake these repairs and get them done, but they simply didn't have the money to do it. And when you have older folks on fixed incomes who don't have the money to provide for these assessments, you get into these really tough situations because say you're a unit owner doesn't have money for the assessment, what happens? You don't pay it, they put a lien on your unit and you can be foreclosed out of it. You're foreclosed out of it, somebody buys it subject to that assessment, maybe they don't buy it anymore. And say that happens to a number of the people in your building, suddenly you're looking at a dramatically less occupancy in a building. Remember, like we had during the foreclosure crisis, where some of these condo buildings were at half occupancy or less. They just simply don't have the money to do the repairs. Now, I think what can happen there is you could probably have solutions at the state level where we would be in a position to possibly either work with private lenders or do it at the state level to lend money for the construction or for the repairs that are needed on buildings like that, and then have the association pay it back over time. That's probably a responsible way of doing it. But you know what? One thing we cannot have, Fred, is for another situation like Surfside to happen.
Absolutely.
So we have to make sure that these buildings get inspected. We have to make sure that they get repaired. We have to find a way to allow buildings that are older and maybe are occupied by older residents, a way of doing that that can prevail, retain the structural integrity of those buildings and help save lives.
All right, now we come to the lightning round because I know you got to get going. So just give me a 25 words or less. Today, it was in the papers that Dr. Joseph Ladapo was confirmed as I think the state top health official by the Florida Senate 24-15. Representative Lori Berman stated that Ladapo is, quote, not the right person for the job, unquote. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement former supervisor stated that they could not recommend him, and Senator Tina Polsky stated that he is clearly a political appointee. Obviously, she had a personal issue with him when he wouldn't mask up, and she'd been had recent health issues that she thought it would be a good idea. So real quick, what do you think about Dr. Ladapo? Is he the right guy for the job?
About his qualifications, though I'm told that he's very qualified and he went to a very good school and all that's good, but I didn't like what I saw when it came to the human decency side as it related to Senator Polsky.
Sure.
And during one round of his confirmation hearings, I don't think it was yesterday, but prior to that, he was asked very simple questions about the propriety of the vaccine, and he gave very obtuse answers, and I didn't appreciate that either. So yeah, I didn't like what I saw on that part of it.
Okay, very good. Real quick, the Ag Reserve, the idea was to forever preserve a certain area of the county for agriculture, but as farmers age out, their kids don't want to take up the family farming, and because of other factors like COVID, everybody now has discovered Palm Beach County. Everybody wants to live down here, you know, endless summer, no winters, no shoveling of snow, and we need housing stock. So how do we balance the aspirations that were behind the creation of the Ag Reserve with the necessities of housing all of these Johnny or Janie come latelys to our wonderful Palm Beach County?
And that's an interesting question that probably isn't, it's not a state level question. That's probably a better question for the county officials, because they're the ones who vote on that. Remember the city of Boca, we don't have the Ag Reserve in our area. So that was never an issue that we dealt with. I'm not sure the state has jurisdiction over that kind of development decision. I trust our county officials to do the right thing as it relates to preserving the Ag Reserve, but also making room for an appropriate and reasonable level of growth going on. Because remember, if you don't grow, you tend to stagnate. And then also you run into the issues as it relates to, you know, the affordability of housing, which has become a major issue here, and one issue that we're working to address at the city of Boca. And one way of addressing it is just having new stock of housing. Should it necessarily be in the Ag Reserve? I don't know that, but there needs to be a solution somewhere.
Okay, now across the street from our Sentry village, Boca Raton, where I'm speaking from, GL Homes has been recently approved, or very close to being approved, to putting in several hundred of their low-rise single-family homes. And so we're seeing it immediately around us. A few years ago, they completed Uptown Boca Raton. Have you seen that project? Which, by the way, a little trivia fact, is the only elevated garage, I think, in Boca Raton, the first one ever built. That's for the residents. As you build all of these shopping centers, or that one's a mixed-use community with something like 475 dwelling units, you possibly contribute to flooding, because the water can no longer trickle down into the ground. And do you think that all this overdevelopment is going to prove disastrous, as far as will become now a flood-prone area, and that the aquifer will not be able to recharge? And of course, we get our drinking water from the aquifer, not to mention there's saltwater intrusion and so on. Well, what can you say about development in general? Are we going too far, too fast with this?
A big proponent, Fred, of the concept of concurrency, if you know that phrase. Concurrency is a planning, not even ideal, it's planning standard that says before you allow people to build, before you allow new residential, new office, new retail, whatever it is, you need to have the infrastructure in place to withstand the new impact, the impact that this new development will have. And so that's something that I very, very strongly have pushed that we keep to and hew to closely in Boca Raton. So what does that mean? That means we have enough road capacity to handle any new development. That means we have the water and sewer capacity to handle the new development. It means we have the schools available and the space in schools to be able to handle that. And so that's a very basic tenet of good planning, and something that we've tried to, you know, enforce in Boca. I would hope that before any kind of development got built out west, when it's in the county, the same level of concurrency was required and expected from before it would be approved. That kind of would be how I would approach it, and how I think, you know, in large part, they should approach it at the county level.
Okay.
And so,
now,
Fred, I'm so sorry. I probably have to
just
say,
last question. What can you tell us about this Don't Say Gay movement and the critical race theory that they want to ban? Now, this would be something on your beat, right? This would be a state legislative issue. What's your position on that? And
position is
that describe what it means.
Sure. My position on that is education in our state is a major issue. The problem with it is that Florida funds our educational system like 48th or 47th out of 50 states. The major issue as it relates to education is funding, and making sure that we have adequate funding to teach our kids. These other issues are sideshows, and I don't see why we're not addressing the real issue here, which is making sure that our public schools get the proper funding that they need. All this other stuff seems superfluous compared to that.
Right, but specifically the Don't Say Gay part of it, a lot of people say that the schools are really the right environment to start talking about that. A lot of kids, some of them could be in grade school and they're grappling with their sexuality. Young boys feel that they are attracted to other boys, and there's nothing wrong with that. The governor is adamantly against bringing that into the schools. Do you think it has a place in the schools, or do you think there is no place for discussions of sexuality in grade school or even junior high, what they call middle school down here?
I think that our schools need to be inclusive, and that means being willing to have discussions with students. If they're willing to open up to a teacher on something like that, because it's difficult to open up to a parent or somebody at home, I don't see why we would eliminate the opportunity for kids to do that. But again, this is an instance of the legislature kind of focusing on this one narrow issue. In fact, probably creating a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. And it operates as, focus that our priorities are kind of misaligned at the moment. We need to focus on funding our schools to the right level, not on stuff like that.
Okay, last question. Top 3 issues. If you're elected, what do you think the top 3 most important money or whatever issues are that you will have to deal with if you're elected? I'm assuming you will be elected, by the way. Congratulations in advance.
Fred, my top 3
By the way, I forgot to mention, you are a Democrat, right? I think I might have mentioned it. And it's almost certain that you will be the Democratic nominee, and you'll probably face some token opposition in November. But traditionally, the seat you're running for has been a Democratic seat. Is that correct?
The seat that I will be running in hasn't existed before.
Well, I understand, but in this general area, it generally... Right.
Yes.
So what do you think are the burning issues? 2 or 3, top issues?
There's them for me. Infrastructure, making sure that our roadways, bridges are safe and upgraded where necessary. Second is education, like I just mentioned. And third is our environment.
All right. You've been very generous with your time. Again, we're talking with city councilmen. Do they still say councilman, or do we have to say council person, or?
Either one. I go by either one. I go by Andy, Andrew, Andre.
Right. We're talking with Councilman Andy Thomson, and there's no P in his name. If you want to write a check out to his campaign fund, it's Thomson, and he's the Democratic nominee, or will be, we believe, come August. I don't think he'll be facing any opposition, and probably the next state rep from the newly created District 91. We want to thank you very, very much. We knew we had a winner in you when we met you 10 years ago at the Boca Del Rey Club, and you swore to me when you showed up in this suit, you were the only one in the room with a suit and a tie, and of course, turn sideways, give her a profile. Let me see your profile. You got that beautiful, that hair you got there. I mean, this guy's got the best hair in politics, and generally we elect the people with the best hair, Anyway, so congratulations in advance. We hope you are successful. And of course, we look forward to supporting your candidacy. I'm not in charge of a Democratic club, so I can endorse you all I want, and you will have the endorsement of the Village Sentry. And thank you again. Once again, this is Fred Hadley reporting over Facebook for the Village Sentry, and we'll now conclude our very enlightening interview with the handsome, debonair, and very intelligent and physically fit Andy Thomson. Go, Andy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Fred.
All right. Have a great day.
You too, buddy.